we gave an introduction to the mindful contract administration, and in the meantime, we have had an introduction to RICS new rules of measurement, which is NRM 1, 2, and 3. So for the newcomers who have joined, actually, let me just give you a little bit of an oversight about insight about what are the things that we were discussing. This is about cost planning, all about cost planning, which may be useful for your cost planning activities as a contract administrator, as a quantity surveyor, as an engineer, maybe an architect will also benefit from this one. And for that, we have got some standards. So out of these standards, RIC's new rules of measurement is one of the pioneer and one of the most salient documents that we are using in the market. So this is all about cost planning using NRM 1, which is the new rules of measurement 1, right? Which is being issued by RICS. So in the day one, what we have done is we have done certain things related to what exactly was meant by mindful contract administration, right? And then we move on to the introduction to RICS new rules of measurement, or NRM 1, 2, and 3. And then we did the introduction to cost planning and risk management. Then we move on to the summary of NRM 1 approach to cost planning. And we started with measurement rules for risk in cost order of cost estimating. As you are aware, the NRM 1 has got three sections pertaining to cost planning. First one being the order of cost estimating, the second one being the cost planning itself, and the third one is for the elemental cost planning, which we are going into more details once the design is developed. So this is what we were discussing during the day one. But the measurement rules for risk in our order of cost estimating, we did an introduction to the 12 attributes pertaining to the order of cost estimating measurement rules, but we did not conclude that. So there is a bit which is remaining from the last day's session, which I am going to bridge in this today's session. And then after that, we are going to talk about measurement rules for risk in cost planning. Actually, this is the next step, right? This is more precise and more detailed. We are going to discuss about that. And we are going to give an introduction to ISO 31000. As you are aware, ISO 31000 has been issued in 2009, and there is a new version of ISO 31000, that is 2018 version. And then we are going to talk about more serious stuff, that is management of risk, RICS approach in knowledge, practice, and advice, and then qualitative and quantitative risk analysis. Regarding the Monte Carlo simulation, we are going to talk about it a little later because I think as the time permits, the Monte Carlo simulation will be, this is a quantitative risk analysis method. If you are doing PMP and any other sort of a course, you might have come across this one. And I'm sure that the quantity surveyors are also aware of this Monte Carlo simulation method, which is a quantitative risk analysis method, which we are going to discuss as well. Perhaps it will be discussed in day 3, right? And then I hope you remember I was discussing regarding the risks, and I gave you some sort of an insight about these 9 elements in the beginning of this particular session. And I gave you a little bit of a challenge in order to give some responses pertaining to what exactly are the real risks within these 9 items, right? So I got a couple of responses from some of the attendees, viewers, and I'm going to give you the insight about how we are going to approach this problem. So at a glance, you can see that these 9 elements, which is the time overrun, inadequate site investigation, environmental impact, ineffective quality management, cost overrun, poor health, employer's choice of materials, fatality, and unavailability of funds. These 9 items seems to be risks, right? But when we move on to more details, right? You can understand that I have color coded these 9 risk elements into different colors, and I'll tell you the reason why, right? Now, you can see this inadequate site investigation has got two colors, right? I will tell you the reason for that one. So this color coding I'm going to use for, I hope that you remember during the first session I mentioned to you about four types of risks, right? The first one is the design development risk, the second one being the construction risk, and the third one being employer's risk, and there is another element called employer's other risks, and we are going to identify what is the difference between employer's risks and employer's other risks. So this color coding helps you to comprehend what exactly the cluster of risks that this is belonging to. So you can see there are three black items, right? And then two green items and two blue items, right? And there is one red item, actually three red items, and item B is sort of a mix. So let us see how this cluster has come into play. But I want you to first of all understand that items A, E, and H did not fall into any of these categories, which will give you a question mark, right? I asked you the question whether which of these are real risks, and now I have come up with a partial answer to you, because by end of today's session, you will be able to get to know more things about what is happening and what are the things that you are going to learn, right, in this regard. So, inadequate site investigation. Let us move into the RICS NRM1, right, which has got four different types of risks. Actually, this is going to be discussed within the third session. But in order to give you some sort of an insight about what I mentioned, you can see item number 5, which is a design development risk. The exact wording which is appearing within design development risks is appearing within the example which I have given you. So I colored it in green in order to cluster it as a design development risk. So normally in this part of the world we have a lot of brown fields, but in Sri Lanka, India, or any some of the countries which are having tropical climates, we have got a lot of green fields, right? So I use the color green in order to label the design development risks. So you can see there are two design development risks which is appearing within these 9 items, which can easily be clustered into the design development risks. Number one, inadequate site investigation, as you have seen in the previous one. Inadequate site investigation appears within this one as well, right? And then we go to item D, ineffective quality management procedures. You can see the same slide is appearing for both these items. So it is very clear as far as NRM one is concerned, right? These two items fall into the design development risks. So there is no argument, there is no ambiguity that items B and D is are real risks. Okay. Now let us move on to the next item, right? This environmental impact. As you are aware, right, when the construction in the site is going on, right, the environmental risks become more practical, right? Then only you will understand what are the risks that you are facing as far as the environmental impact is concerned. So item number 12 of NRM1 element 13.2 falls into this particular category of construction risks. Okay, that is why I clustered it into the red color, environmental impact. Now, once again, if I go back, you can see inadequate site investigation is once again appearing within this one. So as a contractor, the contractors, their first task in collecting the tender document is to go and visit the site, right? And then they do a site investigation as well, right? But during the design stage, there needs to be a big site investigation needs to be done, because employer is the person who says to the alien contractor who comes into this particular site, right? Mr. Contractor, this is the particular site that you are going to build your bridge, build your building, or build your tower, right? So this is how this inadequate site investigation, this risk spans from design development risk up to the construction risks as well, right? So that is why I colored this particular item B in two different colors. Inadequate site investigation falls into two different categories of risk. One is called the design development risk. The other one is called the construction risk, right? And then we will move on to the other elements. Now we have already seen item B, C, and D definitely falls into the real risks. Then I'm going to item F, poor health and safety procedures. So if there is no proper health and safety practices within the construction, right? You can see this is a very large, long list which appears within the construction risks. You can see 38 items have been listed within NRM1. The important thing about this is NRM1 itself says this is a non-exhaustive list. I hope you remember, if you have gone through my YouTube channel, I mentioned about the definition of the word site, right? When the definition of the word site in 1977 version has got certain items in, on, under, and through. Only these four items define what is exactly meant by a site, right? However, FIDIC identified later on that it is a non-exhaustive list, and then they use the word at, right, rather than using a non-exhaustive list which may create a lot of ambiguities. They have used a more whole sense required word, right, which is called at the site. Then you can say at the site means all these prepositions comes into play, right? So this is why NRM1 itself, they themselves say that this is a non-exhaustive list. Therefore, there may be certain risks which are not appearing within this particular list as well, and this gives you a very good guideline. 99% of them have been taken care of within this list, right? Now let us go into this classification business once again. So you can see the poor health and safety practices, which is colored in red color. You know, during the construction, it is the most risks are appearing within the construction phase of the project. That is why we put it under red. And then you can see A, B, C, D, and F have already been classified. And you go into the employer's choice of materials, right? You can see under employer's other risks, there is another item called employer's specific requirements. Let us go back to this particular example, right? Now it says materials in mockup. You might have seen that the mockup, let's say if it is a hotel, right? If it is a hotel, there's a high risk of approval of the materials based on the blend of color, based on the usage, based on the choice of the end user, right? Let's say the employer or the developer is a hotel owner, right? Then he has a lot of experience about the eye of this mockup. So even though this particular material has been specified, this material has been clearly stipulated within the contract, when it comes to the mockup, you can see the employer will change the material. So if you change a single material, let's say you have got 300 hotel rooms, and this change will affect a whole area, a whole hotel in terms of cost and maybe in terms of time. Now, this gives us a very important point. When you're doing a quantitative risk analysis, you're doing two types of quantitative risk analysis. One is quantitative schedule risk analysis, a quantitative cost risk analysis. Okay, those two are very common in the market, right? Quantitative schedule risk analysis can be done within Primavera V6 itself, right? And quantitative cost risk analysis is normally done using the Monte Carlo simulation method. So we are going to talk about the Monte Carlo simulation method within my third session. And I will give you a little bit of an insight about how Primavera is using the quantitative schedule risk analysis, but it is not part of this session, which is basically about cost planning, right? So employer's choice of materials. I still remember why when I chose this color blue, right? I remember one of our mentors, Professor Sam, has used the same color blue. Why he said this futuristic blue, right? The blue is future, the color of future. Without employer, we don't have a future, right? So this is why we use the word, we use the color blue for the employer, right? And then the unavailability of funds. This is also one of the most important things. You can see under financial risks in the employer's other risks, it has got availability of funds, unavailability of grants and grant refusals. So you can see out of that, this is also a risk. Now I have already classified out of these 9 items, 6 items very clearly falls into one of these categories of design development risk, construction risk, employers risk, or employers other risk. Now what is happening with item A, E, and H? Now this is my second question to you, right? You still can WhatsApp me on this particular number after the end of this session until midnight today, right? Whether A, E, and H are real risks or not. If they are real risks, please give me the reasons. If they are not real risks, also please give me the reasons. Once again, you will be getting a free entrance to my next seminar, which will be done in the month of December. So this is how the things are going on. You can take a screenshot of this one if you really want to do that one. It is already there within the presentation which I have done previously, right? Right. Now we will move on to the next section today, right? Which I discussed about 12 attributes, related to the order of cost estimating, right? ISO 31000 I'll be discussing later on, right? 12 attributes of measurement rules of risk in order of cost estimates, right? Now, if you go through the section 2.15 of NRM1, you can easily classify them into 12 attributes, okay? So these 12 attributes will be discussed in little detail, and let's see how it goes, right? First and foremost, it says management of risk involves 4 activities. Okay, it clearly mentions identification, assessment, monitoring, and control. Right? How I got to remember this one is I recall this as IAMC. Right? So let us understand what exactly is meant by clause 2.1.51. It says all building projects involve risks, right? Some obvious, some less so. The proper management of risk saves money and time, right? Now, you might have wondered why the word quality is not there, why the word scope is not there, right? This is why I told the risk assessment is being done for time and money, right? Once the quality is detrimental to the project, it attracts the time extension, right? It attracts the cost overrun. So the quality also falls into this time and money. That is why I told you there are 2 methods of risk analysis, especially the quantitative risk analysis, the schedule risk analysis, as well as the cost risk analysis. Then it says risks can occur at any point in a building project, and it is essential that they are identified, assessed, monitored, and controlled, right? Now let us go back to this one. So this is the first rule in order of cost estimates pertaining to the management of risk. Then we will move on to the second one. It is risk response, right? How do you respond to the risk? Now, risk response is actually fivefold. It's very easy for you to memorize with the word arts retention. So this is one of the tools which I have been using in order to memorize certain words. So that the word arts is a common term for you. Avoidance, reduction, transfer, sharing, and retention. And one of the viewers here actually asked me a very vital question pertaining to this one. Where is the word mitigation? Right? Okay, that is also an important question because the word mitigation is not there within RICS in RM1. Okay, so normally the word mitigation. Now let's say you mitigate the delay, right? You mitigate the delay in the sense normally you reduce the delay, right? So the word mitigation is embedded within the word reduction itself, right? Sometimes when there is a program which is when the engineer feels that the program is going to be delayed, right? the engineer asks the contractor to give an accelerated program, right, in order to mitigate the delay. So that means reduce the delay. So likewise, so there are certain other terminology which is appearing within the other documents which is being used in the market. Sometimes you may have to correlate them. Once I discuss about ISO 31000, you can find the word mitigation. The word mitigate is there within that one as well, right? Then let us just understand what is this item number two means. Risk exposure, right? As you can see on your top right hand corner, this is a very common sign of a exposed wire, right? We call this an exposure to an electric shock, right? So this is also part of the risk exposure, right? Uh, Sometimes when you expose to the risk, right, you try to mitigate that one. This is how what this lady is doing, right? When she feels her arms become benumbed, she's trying to give hot air to her hands, right, the palms, in order to keep them alive, right? You might have seen that in certain situations when you are exposed to very cold weather, sometimes you may not be able to sort of move your limbs, right? So this is sort of a mitigation. So risk exposure changes as the building project progresses. Now, this is very important. This is why I told the risk management is a continuous process. Once I discuss about ISO 31000, you will understand it is very clearly mentioning, right, that risk management is a very live process. You cannot just stop idle and then stay calm and quiet related to any risk situation. Continually managing the risks is therefore essential. As the design evolves, more of the project requirements are defined and risk response can be decided. Now, where the word risk response comes into play, then again, once again, you will come into this particular wording, which is called arts retention, right? Then item number three says limited information X%, full information 0%. I'll tell you with a very tangible answer to this one. You know about construction contingency, am I right? So when you are putting a contingency, if you go to the risk definition itself, it says it is something related to a contingency plan, right? It is sort of an uncertainty, right? When you are putting a construction contingency at the beginning of the project, when you are signing the project, it may be 5% or 10%. But once you come into the as-built situation, this particular percentage becomes diminish. Okay, then it comes to once you receive the full information, it will become zero. This is the same thing as when it appears to the design details as well. But still, when you are doing the design, and once the design is finished, the risk will not be zero, because you are still not aware of the fact whether this particular design is practical, whether this design is constructible. So that is why it will not become zero and once the design period is over. So let us go into this item number three. It says risk avoidance, right? uh, Item number three. Uh, this is risk exposure, which I was discussing about that. I mentioned about item number three, limited information, that how the percentage of the risk becomes a particular percentage and then it becomes zero. Now let us again go back to this 2.1.52, right? They are talking about the risk avoidance. As I have explained to you, you all are familiar with this particular building, which is in Colombo area, right? Uh, uh, whenever there is risks have serious consequences on the project outcome, they are totally unacceptable. Risk avoidance measures might include a review of the employer's brief. Sometimes you may have to review the employer's brief once again. I will give you one example. When Sydney Opera House in Australia was going to be constructed, then the employer had a budget of 7 million Australian dollars back in 1960s. I am talking about a very old thing here, okay, right? But they didn't have any idea about what is going to be constructed. The only thing which was in their mind was to have an opera house. An opera house can have a different capacity, a different facility, a different complexion, right? All these things were not there at the time of the competition came into place, right? So Sydney Opera House is a very famous case about time and cost overrun, right? You can read a lot of articles about that, a lot of videos you can view, right? So, however, now I'm going to talk about how do you avoid the risk. There are some important things which I wanted to discuss with you. Now, one of them is the this development mix, right? Now, the development mix. I have got a case study here. The people who are living in Oman, they know about this particular area, right? This is called Russell Hamra Development Project, right? So this particular project, the phase one is now finished, right? So what you can see here is this is located in Kuram area. It's a very mountainous area. As you can see here, there are a lot of brown areas, right? These green areas are most of the areas which are man-made. This is what I can tell you, right? So, development mix. Before going into the development mix, once again, let me go through this risk avoidance. What the RICS in RM1 says is, when you are doing the risk avoidance, you can do a couple of things. Reappraisal of the project, right? Review of the employer's brief, alternative design solution. There are couple of aspects that you can take into account in order to avoid the risk if this is not possible. Okay, if you come up with some sort of a problem in the beginning itself. Okay, so this particular case study has been specifically designed in order to address this particular issue, right? uh, the townhouses are this what you can see here, these two townhouses, they are divided by one particular single wall, and there are two townhouses as you can see here. And the villas, they have got attached villas, they have got detached villas, different types of villas. And apartments are two bedroom and three bedroom apartments. So this is sort of a development mix, right? It is not a single type of building that we are building here. We are building different choices, like product differentiation. As you are aware, then when you go into the supermarket and have a Pepsi, sometimes you are getting Pepsi Zero, right, or Coca-Cola Zero, right? So that is for the people who doesn't like to have this sweet taste, something like that. So development mix addresses different stakeholders requirements, right? So this particular development mix, I have got a small case study. I hope you remember during the first session I explained to you about the linear programming, right? The knowledge of linear programming, how it is beneficial for your cost planning, how it is beneficial for your decision making, right? So these figures have been sort of changed. These are not actual figures because I'm not authorized to use actual figures here, but the concept is here where I will explain this to you, right? Now, the choice of type of house is X, Y, or Z, that is townhouses, villas, or apartments. As you can see from the price itself, right? You can see in order to build a townhouse, you will get less cost. I'm sorry, I'm using the word Omani riyals. You can easily, for the simple conversion, you can assume that one Omani riyal is 500 LKR. So in Indian rupees, I think it is about 250 or some. So, right? So, like that. So, the cost per unit for townhouses, villas, and apartments vary, right? You can see it that. But the employer has decided, as you can see here, there is a 20% margin that the employer has decided to keep, right? So selling price per unit is 60,000, 96,000, and 42,000 respectively. So like that, the profit margin becomes like this. Now let us see what are the constraints. Now these are the areas that we need to take into account when you are pricing the risk, when you are assessing the risks. You might have seen when you are producing the cost plan, you use a particular section called assumptions and exclusions. Am I right? Right? Constraints also trigger assumptions. Constraints also trigger exclusions. This is how this is going to happen. Now, see, one of the constraints that you are having in this particular case study is the minimum number of apartments is 20. As you can see here, you cannot have an apartment block with 2 apartments. You cannot have an apartment block with 5 apartments because it is not a economical solution, right? Therefore, the minimum number of apartments, I have used this particular variable is a z, right? So z has to be 20 or more. So this is one of the constraints. Now you might refresh your linear programming knowledge which you have learned in the college or the university, right? Z is more than or equal z 20 gives you a barrier. It gives you a barrier. So in no way that you can exceed this particular barrier. Then you are saying there's a budget, another fixed element, which is called 4 million, right? So the employer's budget is 4 million. With that, you are coming up to uh, a particular equation. Why this is important is when the engineer decides the change in the development mix as a risk avoidance uh, tool, as the cost consultant, as the quantity surveyor, you should be able to give the cost. You should be able to give you the values related to these particular items, right? So the number, this is the equation which you have to come up with. It cannot exceed the ceiling of 4 million. So this is the cost limit that the employer is deciding, right? We call it the budget, but the cost limit has been decided based on the budget. So this particular equation says 50,000 X, that is the number of townhouses, 80,000 Y, that is the number of villas, 35,000 Z, that is the number of apartments. But this should not exceed, the Z should be more than 20 all the time. Now the risks involved in that one can be design development, construction, employer changes and employer other. Now, rather than going through the real linear programming process, I have given you some very basic back of the envelope calculations which you can do without even the knowledge pertaining to the linear programming knowledge. As you can see here, I started with 20 townhouses, 20 villas, and 20 apartments. You can see the profit is 660,000. The budget is 3.3 million. You can go a little more, isn't it? Right? And when you go along the line, you can see in a certain position, right? It exceeds 4 million. So you cannot go beyond that one. So this is the optimum solution that you come up with by changing X, that is the townhouses by 555. This is the basic of linear programming, right? So the second one, what I have done is I kept X as a constant and I started changing Y. Then you can see because the value of the Y is high, when you are increasing the number of Ys, it easily comes into the budget limit, right? And the profit is less. So that you can see the development mix which is containing more Ys and less X's, which will give you a less profit. So more X's will be more profitable. And then you are again once again coming into the third scenario wherein the number of apartments has been increased by 555. Then again you come into the play. You can still see even though the apartments are increased, even though the cost of apartments is less, right? You can still see once you reach 4 million, right? Your profit will be less, right? But in order to do a very correct calculation, you have to do the linear programming, and you can prepare the charts, you can prepare the graphs, and you can easily take the decision as to which development mix gives you the optimum profit for the desired budget. This is just a calculation which I have used for that one, right? So this is why the development mix is very important in risk avoidance. Then we will move on to the risk reduction, right? That is the other method of the addressing a risk. That is called Number one is once again redesign, right? Then the most important term in cost planning, in terms of the engineer's perspective, value engineering comes into play. Now you can see, if you are seeing the FIDIC latest versions, 1999 or 2017 version, you can see the value engineering has become a sort of a very, very salient clause within the standard form of contract, right? So, like that, this redesign combined with improved value engineering has become, right, a very, very important point in risk reduction. Number two, more detailed design or further site investigation, right? So risk becomes reduced when you are doing a more detailed design, right? A further site investigation. Yesterday you investigated the site and you did not explore a certain area. Today you go into that particular area as well, and then you do some sort of a investigation. You find that there is a buried cable. Now the risk becomes reduced because your risk element for underground cabling that you have already put now can be quantified, isn't it? Right? Now you can identify exactly the area where the underground cabling is coming. So the risk reduction comes into play. Then different materials or engineering services. Now, as I have explained to you last time, for example, the block work, right? You can use autoclaved aerated block in place of cement sand blocks. You can use any type of other blocks in place of cement sand blocks. In this particular example, which I have taken into account, what you can see here, this exterior, they call it as exterior insulation finishing systems. They use something called EIFS. EIFS is about 10 to 12 codes are there, but it is an integrated system which supplants the plaster and paint requirement, and it is an integrated system. It is more thermally viable and more desirable, more durable. There are lot of advantages of EIFS system. So perhaps these different materials or engineering services will become a salient point in deciding which is more suitable from long term perspective, from life cycle costing perspective. So this is how the risk reduction can be done. But there may be other things as well which comes into play. Now, for example, EIFS. When you are using the word EIFS, there may be people who doesn't have the know-how, who doesn't have the practical knowledge about how to apply this one, right? So you may have to train the people. So you have to think about the flip side of the coin as well, whether it is workable, whether it is practicable. Like in the likes of Oman context, sometimes you may have to be very careful when you are using things like that, right? Because the people doesn't have the know-how pertaining to certain areas. In Sri Lanka and India also, this may be applicable based on the areas where the technology is growing or the technology is not yet come into power of the required desired level. Then change in the project execution plan. It is another very important risk reduction plan which we can use, right? The package, the work content differently to package or to carry out enabling works, right? Now this you might have seen in Oman, right? As an example, for my Oman viewers. Now project execution plan has been changed in different projects. Now for instance, Oman Museum Across Ages. This is one of the projects which is being done in Niswa area in Oman. The employer decided to split the packages into two packages, right? One is the enabling works package. The other one is the main works package. Likewise, okay. Then change in the contract strategy to allocate risk between the project participants in a different way. This is where the procurement strategy comes into the play, right? Sometimes you might have thought, right, a particular power plant which is consisting of lot of package plants, right? You might have thought it can be designed by a designer and given to a contractor to construct. But towards the latter part of the design, maybe once you are getting quotations, once you are going through the quotations, You have seen that there are a lot of repetitive items. There are a lot of items which can be done by an experienced contractor. So you decide to change the procurement plan. You decide to change the procurement route, right? From the red book to the yellow book, right? Maybe the design and build option. So likewise, this risk reduction can be done in 6 different ways. Then the risk transfer. Risk transfer is also a sort of a important thing, right? Sometimes you might have seen that when you are giving the insurance, right? When you are giving the insurance to a particular contractor, you are taking a risk transformation, right? But sometimes clients opt to keep the risk within themselves, owing to the fact that some of the costs are very high. Now for example, the airport project in Oman, right? They used a blanket, they call it an umbrella risk, right? Umbrella insurance, right? Why they got an umbrella insurance is there were a lot of contracting parties. When you have a lot of contracting parties, each and every contracting party has to take an insurance to this particular area. So then there will be a lot of overlapping issues which may come into play. There may be a lot of unnecessary costs come into play. Rather than doing that one, the client or the employer decided to have an umbrella insurance, right? So this is how it has come into play. Then the risk sharing occurs when the risk is not entirely transferred and employer retains some element of risk. This is like when you are preparing a lump sum contract and an estimated quantities contract, right? Now you know that some element of the risk employer retains, some element of the risk you are sharing with the contractor. When it becomes what do you call a lump sum contract, the contractor is risk contractor has a higher risk. When it becomes a remeasurable contract, the employer also takes some part of the risk, because the employer says, Mr. Contractor, you are supposed to build this building, but you are going to remeasure under this particular rate. Okay, something like that. And then the risk retention. Risk is retained by the employer that are not necessarily controllable. This remaining risk is called the residual risk exposure. This residual risk exposure, we are going to discuss about that separately. So it's a little bit of a little bit of an advanced subject. We will let you know about. I will let you know about that in my third session, right? So this is how the risk transferring happens, right? Now we have come to a certain point wherein wherein the 4 items of the 12 attributes have been discussed. Now, before moving further into this particular attributes, I am going to introduce you a new element. I'm going to introduce you something new, because I'm going to give you a little bit of a homework to discuss, because there are certain overlapping areas which will not be useful. We are going to use this time in a more let me say, in a more productive way, right? Because this is a 6-hour course. If I were to discuss all these 12 things, I don't think I will be able to cover each and everything in particular detail, but I am going to cover the same attributes, same aspects within the next particular item, right? Now the order of cost estimating has been covered substantially, and now we are moving on to the now we are moving on to the actual cost planning, right? Now actual cost planning is also of very much importance, because it is defined by 10 attributes as opposed to the 12 attributes which I have mentioned within the order of cost estimating, right? Now we are going to discuss about those attributes. You can see the first attribute being risk allowances are being allocated to reflect the employer's risk exposure. Now, even though we are talking about design development risks, construction risks, or employer's risks, ultimately, employer is the person who is going to pay for this. Employee is the person who is going to enjoy the facility of the completed work. So ultimately, employer's risk exposure is of prime concern in order for you to decide, right? Number one is the consequences of employer's residual risk. No standard percentages. It is very clearly mentioned within the cost planning stage of the NRM1 that percentages are not no standard percentages. Actually, the percentages have to be derived based on certain things, something like past past experience. That is number one, right? Number two is the type and complexity of the project, right? And number three is the global context that you have to take into account, the global context at this juncture, right? Which may be totally different from the global context of the previous years. One of the most important thing is this COVID-19, right? We all know that due to the outbreak of COVID-19, there are a lot of restrictions which has been imposed between the countries. So that becomes a higher risk. Therefore, this percentage cannot be generalized. The percentages which were there previously cannot be generalized. Okay. Then the completeness of the design, amount of site investigation. This is very important when you are talking about the first rule, right? The first rule I have discussed in a very short form. What you need to understand is risk allowances are being allocated to reflect the employer's risk exposure. It talks about the consequences of employer's risk, no standard percentages, and completeness of design, amount of site investigation, right? Then, number two, the second rule of cost planning says formal risk analysis has to be done. Number one, to identify the employer's risk exposure. Number two, to make considered risk allowances for risks, right? So these two are going to be discussed. When you discuss about the elemental cost planning, there are certain rules which is actually this is evolving now, right? In the third day session, you can see how from the how these terminology, how these rules have evolved from the order of cost estimating to cost planning. So that is important. Then number three, it's one of the most important things, reassessment of risk registers and risk estimates. Now, normally this reassessment of risk registers and risk estimates has to be done in a continuous basis. This is why I told you that is very important. Risk is a very dynamic thing. Number four, successive assessments to ensure decreasing uncertainties due to increasing definition of the project. Now, when you are doing the cost planning, we are going to talk about formal cost plan 1, 2, 3 within the third session, how the cost planning has been evolved, right? However, now when you are doing the cost plan, you know that there is a concept design cost plan, there's a schematic design cost plan, there's a detailed design cost plan. So look at these words very carefully. Successive assessments to ensure decreasing uncertainties. When I mentioned about the word risk, when I defined the word risk, I said risk is an uncertainty. You're pricing or scheduling an uncertainty, right? When you are doing the quantitative risk analysis. Here, what you are going to do is whenever there is an increase in definition of the project, right? Now, for example, at the concept design stage, the employer might say this is going to be a 100-key 4-star hotel. That's all. Then how the cost consultant is going to decide on the cost based on the number of keys, because he has got in his records what is the cost for a 4-star hotel, right? Per key, what is the cost, like that. But when the design evolves, okay, you are going to discuss how many basements are there, right? How many other facilities are there, and then you are going to embed that particular cost and reflect that within the unit cost of that particular hotel. So this is how successive assessments to ensure decreasing uncertainties comes into play. Now here I'm going to take another comma and I'm going up a little bit. in order to give you a little bit of an understanding about ISO 31000, because this is going to be very important to you, right? I have distributed this particular document to you as a pre-read material, right? ISO 2009, when it was issued previously, it has got a different approach. If you read, I will send this the 2009 version as well, which is also freely downloadable, which I will send to you, right? It talks about three things: principles, framework, and process, right? Why I'm going to discuss about this here is this is talking about an organizational risk management platform, right? Organizational risk management platform point of view, right? Once you look into the cost planning, there are a lot of things that you can learn. There are a lot of things that you can uh, value add into your cost planning process. Now, it has got seven attributes. If you go to the forward, that is the first portion of this particular ISO standard, it talks about seven things. I'm going to discuss about those seven things, which is very useful for you. This is a very small document. Better to have a printout and keep it with you. It gives you a different opinion. It gives you a different angle of how you look into the risk. Okay. Number one, it says managing risks, making decisions, setting and achieving objectives, and improving performance. Now, how this is applicable to cost planning? Number one is making decisions, right? Now, you might have seen during your cost planning process, the employer or the engineer comes up with different options, right? For example, the engineer comes up with different types of slabs, right? Cast in situ slabs, right? And then post tension concrete slabs, or maybe the prefabricated, right? Prefabricated slabs. Now, when you are asked to do make a decision, then you are doing a risk management. Then you are addressing the risk and management in cost planning process. How do you do that one? The engineer tells you, right, Mr. Cost consultant, these are the particular options that we are going to do. The first thing that you are going to do is you go there, you go out and take the quotations, right? What is the square meter cost? What are the barriers to these things? And then what are the transportation costs? What are the lag times, right? And then what is the life cycle of this particular element? What is the warranty? There are thousands of things which comes into mind. Now you have to make a decision. That decision making is cannot be done just as a quantitative assessment. That is why I'm saying the risk management has got a qualitative risk assessment module, as well as a quantitative risk and assessment module as well. You can color code them. Now we are going to discuss about that in the third session, right? The risks based on its severity, how probable the risks are, and then we are going to color code, right? So when you are making the decision itself, it's not just the numbers. There are many other things that need to come into play, right? This is how making decisions as used in ISO 3000 31000 is useful for your cost planning. And setting and achieving objectives. Now, setting and achieving objectives once again comes into the cost planning process. As I have explained to you, first you set the cost limit. Am I right? Once you set the cost limit, as per the elemental cost planning analysis method, there are 15 elements. Then you give the cost targets, right? You are giving the cost targets to the substructure, you are giving the cost targets to the superstructure, and these cost targets, you are going to do frequent cost checks, right? This is how you set and achieve objectives. Okay, whenever you feel the risk element pertaining to the substructure is getting reduced, okay, within the same cost limit, you can transfer that risk, you can transfer that saving into the other element. This is how the interchangeability of achieving objectives comes into play, right? And then improving performance. How can you improve the performance? You can improve the performance by using value engineering, right? by introducing more effective, more efficient ways and means. So see how useful this particular ISO 31000 into your cost planning is, right? So this is why I'm saying, and it says organizations of all types and sizes. Similarly, due to the bespoke nature of the construction industry, not all the projects are the same unless it's like a, let's say, a McDonald's or KFC. You know that they are having partnering contracts, right? That most of the branded companies, they have partnering contracts not only within the construction field but also within the supply chain management. You know that McDonald's goes with one brand, like Coca-Cola, and then KFC goes with Pepsi, like, or other way around, like that. So there is a sort of a partnering arrangement. So whenever there is a McDonald's outlet needs to be constructed, they enter into in particular countries. They enter into a partnering agreement so that it is very easy. The person who is constructing that knows from the nail itself what needs to be done. So this is why organizations of all types and sizes, in a like of a partnering contract, in the like of what we really know, it is not there. But organizations of all types and sizes are very similar to the bespoke nature of the construction industry. Not all the projects are the same. Today you make a hotel, four-star hotel with 100 keys, but tomorrow you make the same hotel with 100 keys, you may be facing a lot of problems. Okay, so that is why. And then iterative process. This is why I told that our risk management process is also continuously done. In fact, it is the measurement rule which says the formal measurement rule number 3, which I told you, risk registers and risk estimates are to be reassessed at regular intervals. This is what we call as iterative process. Then assists organizations in setting strategy, achieving objectives, and making informed decisions. Now you come across something. It's not new, right? Something useful. Let me say, right? The word informed decision is a word which is been used in the technical terminology. Informed decisions are being taken based on facts. Informed decisions are being taken by rationalized approaches. Okay, so this is why it says here also, when you are going to do a sort of a cost planning process, you are taking informed decisions, right? You will understand what are the repercussions of this particular product, right? Now, why are you using pre-stressed concrete in place of cast in situ concrete, right? Then you are taking an informed decision, right? Cast in situ concrete, right, in accordance with BS 8110, that is the standard for the designing of concrete. Now, in order to achieve its strength, right, it takes 28 days in order to achieve its some amount of its strength, right? So cast in situ concrete will may need to have the supports for a longer period of time, right? When you are compared with precast concrete panels. So this is an informed decision that you are taking based on a rationalized approach. Okay, we want to reduce the time period which is being taken for the concrete cycle. Therefore, we are going for precast concrete. So we are taking informed decisions. Then, fundamental to how the organization is managed at all levels. This is like when you are doing the cost planning, right? The quantity surveyor, senior quantity surveyor, and the commercial manager, right? How the organization that you are going to do at all levels when you are doing the risk management. It contributes to the improvement of management systems as well, right? So when you are preparing the list of risks, and ultimately when it comes to the cost plan, right? Let's say that you are preparing an elemental cost plan. In that particular elemental cost plan, the quantity surveyor, the consultant quantity surveyor, they provide a list of assumptions and exclusions. So these list of assumptions might have been originated from the quantity surveyor who did the quantities for the cost plan, right? When he is doing the quantities for the cost plan, he might have told, now there is an unclear area, right? There is an area where topographical details are at a larger distance than the frequent distances which is appearing within the all the rest of the site. Then the quantity surveyor says to the senior quantity surveyor, there may be a risk of more fluctuations. So shall we put 5% more to the calculation? So this is how you are doing quantitative risk analysis, right? And then uh, helpful in interacting with stakeholders. It is very helpful because you know how many times that I don't know how I have fought with the engineers. Mr. Engineer, this is not going to happen. How many times I have fought with architects? Mr. Architect, this particular column cannot be placed here, right? We cannot have this much of a span because of the basic civil engineering. So likewise, the engineers, the quantity surveyors, they fight with each other. However, conflicts don't always lead to disputes. Sometimes the conflicts will give you better solutions. So this is why it says helpful in interacting with stakeholders. Then it goes to external and internal context of the organization, right? So that is what we call as the internal risks and external risks. So this is how I exactly simulate, right? This particular prototype of risk management ISO 31000 can easily be adapted to the cost planning process. So go through it, read it, you will definitely be benefited within that. As I have explained to you, these principles, okay, now sorry about my international viewers, I need to give a little bit of an insight in this, my native language. දැන් අපි ISO 31000 කියන ඒ ડોකියුමන්ට් එක ගැන කතා කරන්න ගියාම අපි ඒකෙදි කතා කරනවා principles framework and process කියලා කරුණු තුනක් ගැන. ඒ කරුණු තුනේ ඉතාම වැදගත් මේ ISO එකේ ISO එක හොඳට පරිශීලනය කරලා බැලුවම ඔයගොල්ලන්ට තේරෙයි මේ කියන කරුණු හත මම මේ දැන් පැහැදිලි කරපු කරුණු හත හරි ලස්සනට ඔයගොල්ලන්ට cost planning process එකත් එක්ක correlate කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක තමයි මට මෙතන ඇත්තටම කතා කරන්න අවශ්‍ය වුණේ. හරි අපි decision එකක් ගනිද්දී අපි තීරණයක් ගනිද්දී අපි කොහොමද අපේ objectives achieve කරන්නේ? අපි performance එක improve කරන්නේ. ඊට අමතරව මේ අපි දන්නවා construction industry එකේ තියෙන ඒ bespoke nature එක නිසා හැම project එකක්ම එක වගේ නැහැ. project එකින් එකට වෙනස් වෙනවා. ඒක තමයි අපි මේ organizations of all types and sizes කියන එක අපිට ඒක prototype කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක correlate කරන්න පුළුවන් cost planning process එකට. අපි මේ complex cost planning process එකක්ද කරන්නේ simple cost planning process එකක්ද කරන්නේ කියන එකට අපිට මේවා කරන්න පුළුවන්. iterative process කියන එක ඔයගොල්ලෝ හොඳට බලන්න NRM 1 එකේ මේ 3.18.3 කියන rule එකේ. හරි? ඒ rule එකේ very clearly කියලා තියෙනවා risk registers and risk allowances are to be reassessed at regular intervals. ඔන්න ඔය regular intervals කියන වචනේ තමයි මේ iterative process කියලා ISO 31000 කියන එක තුල අපි gap කරලා තියෙන්නේ, right? ඊට පස්සේ අපි කියනවා organization එකකට ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ strategy objectives මේවා කරන්න එහෙමත් නැත්නම් informed decision එකක්. informed decision එකක් කියන්නේ අපි තීරණයක් ගනිද්දී ඒකට අදාළ facts, ඒකට අදාළ rationalization හරියට බලලා ඒ decision එක ගන්න. ඊට පස්සේ එක එක levels අපි quantity survey එක level එකේ ඉඳලා senior quantity survey level එහෙමත් නැත්නම් commercial manager level එක යනකොට ඒක කොහොමද මේ decision එකක් ඒකට improve වෙන්නේ කොහොමද? මොකක් හරි අපි හිතමු risk එකක් quantity survey identify කරා නම් ඒක තව චුට්ටක් groom වෙලා යනවා senior quantity survey ට. ඊට පස්සේ commercial manager ඒ වගේ තමයි, right? ඊට පස්සේ stakeholders ලා engineer, architects, quantity survey අපි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට අපි ගැටුම් ඇති වෙනවා. නමුත් මේ ගැටුම් වලින් සමහරලාට හොඳ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන්. external and internal context කියලා කියන්නේ මේ risk එක internal වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්, risk එක external වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. the project එක ඇතුලේ තියෙන දේවල් ඊට පස්සේ political එහෙමත් නැත්නම් global තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න ගැන අපි කතා කරනවා. Right. Okay. So I just explained this in my native language for better understanding, right? And this particular ISO 31000, sorry, there is a zero missing here, right? I'm just going to correct it. Right. Sorry about that. Right. This ISO 31000 approach to risk management has got three different areas. This is not that clear: principles, framework, and process. But when you are talking about that one, whatever the attributes which I have spoken will be also discussed here. One of them is the continual improvement. Okay, continual improvement. Then human and cultural factors, then best available information, available information කෙනෙක් අපිට that also we can link into the informed decision as well. Okay, then dynamic in the sense, that's what I told, it is a very very rapid, very live process. Risk management, you cannot just sleep, you cannot just close your eyes during the cost planning process and go to the other phase. A lot of things might have been changed, right? So that needs to be improved. And inclusiveness, yes, right? That is, that inclusiveness is also very important, right? We need to include all the things which is related to that one. Customized, but you might have seen that there are cost models, right? Now, if you see the internet, if you go to the Google or something like that, you will find there are some cost models. If you find a cost model for a road, you will find this, but you cannot use it as an off the shelf product. You have to customize it to benefit your situation in order to cater that situation into your project. This is one of the important things. Then structure and comprehensive, then integrated. um, Regarding the leadership and commitment also, this is something, the framework it says, right? And here the risk assessment, they have used three different things. First one is risk identification. Actually, when you are talking about the cost planning process, it is also there. Risk analysis, this is what we are doing as the quantitative and qualitative risk analysis. And then the risk evaluation. Uh, then we are doing a sort of a Primavera run or Monte Carlo simulation. It's the same thing. It's not a big thing, but it's something very similar to our process, right? And then why I wanted to mention about this particular ISO 31000 is this is of utmost importance in order for you to comprehend this cost planning process, right? The 10 attributes to the cost planning process, right? Okay, right. Now we were talking about up to the item number three, that is the reassessment of risk registers and risk estimates, right? We are going to talk about sample risk register in the next session, right? How these risks that you have identified. Now, if you go to this one, let me just explain this to you. It's very important for you to understand this one as well, right? I have spoken to you about couple of risks, right? Now, I have extracted when I was discussing about the exercise which I have given to you. Okay, right. Yes. Now, for example, if you're talking about employers' others risks, right? This one of the things is end user requirements. Now, for example, if you are doing a hotel project, you know that you are having a hotel operator, right? When you are having a hotel operator, the employer may have entered into a separate agreement with the employer's hotel operator, right? Maybe he wants to have the wild air, right, to the site. He wants to have the, we call this the soft opening, right? Soft opening needs to be done, right? Then how the facilities management will be done. So these things are linked with each other. So in the employer's brief, if the employer has omitted one of these end user requirements, it will become a risk, right? It is the quantity surveyor's duty to identify whether this is there, right? Maybe the engineer also needs to go through that one. And then this is very commonly happening, inadequate or unclear project brief. Now, this is happened owing to the fact that most of the employers do not have the specialists in their project management team, right? Right. So, in that case, now for example, I will give you a very simple example. This Sydney Opera House, when they were constructing that one, what they said is, right, we want to have an opera house. Okay. Now, see how big that is. See how ambiguous that is. See how clouded that is, right? When you are talking about an opera house, now my Oman viewers know about the Royal Opera House in is Oman. You know how sophisticated even the seating arrangement is. Okay, you know how sophisticated even the lighting arrangement is, right? If you are going through that one, you will understand a lot of things. So we cannot just confine to the project brief by giving a single sentence, right? So this is why we need to have something called performance specifications, right? Performance specification caters for the requirement of, let's say, what is the outline requirement of the employer. I need a lift, right? I need a lift to accommodate 20 people. That is what the employer might come up and say. And then the engineer has to decide, okay, in order to accommodate 20 people, what is the capacity of the lift which is required, and then so on and so forth. Where are we going to place it, whether it is a centralized location, or a corner of the building, whether it is in line with the regulations and the standards of the particular country. So those are very important things that we need to discuss during the process. So this is one of the things which I wanted to discuss. Now we are at the 10 attributes related to the cost planning. Then this reassessment and of risk registers and risk estimates. I'm going to do a couple of examples during the next two sessions related to that one as well. Then successive assessment to ensure decreasing uncertainties. I discussed about that. Then the cost targets. Now this is very this particular model is familiar to you, right? Now when you are talking about the cost elemental cost planning, your cost targets are, let's say, within the substructure you are talking about demolition, excavation, right? You are having some more sub elements, right? Now here the cost targets are design development risks, employer change risks, construction risks, and employer other risks. Now the importance of that one, all of these lumped together gives you a value, gives you a percentage, right? Then when you are talking about this particular percentage, you have to manage so that you are not exceeding the cost limit. Now it comes in the next one. It says, right, calculation of risk allowance for categories of risk comes into play like this. Okay. Now this R1 is what you call as risk allowance estimate, right? It is comprising of two different elements. Number A is the base cost estimate, right? You know the base cost estimate. Base cost estimate is the risk free estimate, the estimate which we are arriving at by using up to the elemental cost plan item number 12. Okay, you know about that when you are talking about elemental cost plan, right? And then it comes to AP2, that is then P1, right? P1 means the percentage of risk allowance for design development risk. Now you can see, if you put a percentage here, you put a percentage here, you put a percentage here, you put a percentage here. So all these are the multiplication of the multiplication of A, that is base cost estimate. When one of these risks come down, right, you may have to use that particular saving that you are enjoying to the other area. Maybe another area has got a more risk percentage, right? So this is how you do that compromising technique, that how you do give and take, because at the end of the day you cannot exceed the cost limit. That is the important thing, right? Cost limit is the base cost estimate and the risk allowance estimate excluding inflation. This is once again coming into play, because when you go into that structure, you will see, let me explain that to you, why the cost limit excludes uh, this one, right? See, cost limit including inflation comes into play once you do the inflation estimate. So therefore, there is a construction inflation estimate is there. Then normally we are talking about two cost limits: cost limit excluding inflation and cost limit including inflation, right? So those are the two different things that we are talking about, right? Another important thing which I wanted to discuss last time, there's a small minor correction which I have done in my presentation, which once I share that with you, you will understand what it is. Right. It is about this one, building cost estimate, right here. Okay. Now, previously, when I classified this into that one, you might have seen that item 8 external works I have separately used there. But in the correct manner, the substructural basis for measuring building works, structured basis for measured building works is actually group element 1 to 8. Why I am saying that is, it's because of this particular definition, right? There is a definition for base cost building works estimate. You can see building works estimate means the sum of cost targets for groups elements 1 to 8. Now, when I am talking about the risk, the cost targets for risk is design development risk, construction risk, employers risk, and employers other risk, as opposed to the cost targets which is coming in the building works estimate, substructure, superstructure, internal finishes, fittings, like that. Now what we are doing normally when we are talking about the building works estimate also, let's say you have put a price for the unit rate. Let's say in order to build a what do you call four-star building, you are putting a price of, let's say, 450 riyals. For my viewers in Sri Lanka, it is 450 to 500, right? So 478, but for the purpose of easiness of calculation, I'll say it's about 500, the conversion rate, right? So what we are normally going to do is, when we are giving cost targets, when you are talking about 450 square meters per for a particular hotel, right? What you normally do is you subdivide that 450 into substructure, let's say 35, superstructure say 80, internal finishes 120, something like that, right? So when you are feeling that in the superstructure area that you can save, rather than using a conventional method, you are using a precast method. So now all of a sudden the superstructure cost has drastically come down. So that saving that you are making can be attributable to any additional costs in internal finishes. Okay, maybe the hotel operator wants to have higher finishes than specified. So this is how you do the complementary technique in order to have the same cost limit. Likewise, in the risk planning stage also, we use the same technique. When you are having more risks related to construction, you allocate more percentage to that one and reduce the percentage from the design development, like that. Maybe the employer's risk, right? Once again, going back to these 10 attributes, actually today's presentation is 76 slides. I'll be sharing that with you towards the end of the session. Right. Now we are talking about the cost targets, and these five are correct. Then you are talking about the same group element. Why I did not discuss about those 12 elements in the what you call elemental, order of cost estimating is, this particular group element 13 related attribute is already there within that order of cost estimating. Even this base cost estimate. So it is the same thing which is repeating here. But there are some important things that you need to understand, which I will just explain to you, right? Which is called RIBA work stages and OGC gateways. This is not a new thing to you, right? But I will discuss them in detail within the next session, right? Now it is very clearly mentioned, risk registers and risk estimates are to be reassessed at regular intervals throughout the various RIBS work stages. Now RIBA work stages you need to know. OGC gateways you need to know. Those things we'll be discussing in full details in the next session, right? Then something which is very important, which I wanted to discuss once again, is about this design development risk, right? Now, when you're talking about the design development risk, the rule number 6 of the 10 measurement rules in the risk for cost planning, it says main contractors design development risk. What do you mean by that? Right? You are aware that in the FIDIC Red Book, I know that, I hope that most of you are FIDIC users. I have my viewers from UAE as well. So they are much familiar with FIDIC 99 and all. So if you are using the FIDIC Red Book, okay, apart from small elements, the major design liability lies with the engineer, isn't it? Right? So, what it says is where design liability is to be transferred to the main contractor. Now it is called the risk transfer. Okay, this I explained to you, right? So where a design and build or other main contractor led design contract strategies to be used. Now what I'm talking about is a procurement strategy change, like you are changing into EPC contract or something like that. It is recommended that an allowance for main contractors design development risk to be included in the risk allowance for design development risk. So the situation is quite different when you are assessing something like FIDIC yellow book. That is why the procurement strategy, the book that you are using, if you are changing from the red book to the yellow book, you can see that some changes needs to happen. The second element, main contractor's design development risk is a risk allowance that the main contractor may incorporate in its tender price. This is very important, as the risk of accepting the novation of all or some of the employer's design team members. Okay. Now, assignment and novation are two different concepts, right? So, therefore, when you are doing a novation, it's like you are transferring your rights, responsibilities to another person. So, this happens in the construction industry in certain areas. Now, main contractors' design development risk may be also taken into account when the main contractor is pricing the tender. Now, a good question which should be asked is, now during the cost planning stage, we are talking about all these risks, but what about the contractor's risk? Okay, we are talking about the construction risks, right? Now let us go into this particular construction risks that we were talking about the other day, right? Today itself, right? Because contractor himself, when he is pricing his document, he is using a particular risk, right? Mostly the contractor fights that that particular risk element does not belong to the employer. Okay, so in most of the standard forms of contract, it does not talk about that. The contractor's fight is sometimes justifiable because the risk element is belonging to him if he can prove it properly within the rate breakdown. Right now, see, when you are talking about construction risks, we are once again, if you go to the first rule of the risk allowances, it is talking about the risks which is being faced by the consultant, because consultant is the person, not the consultant, the employer. Employee is the person who may be suffering from his schedule overrun as well as the cost overrun. So those are the two different attributes that is. But let us just go through these construction risks. It says inadequate site investigation. This is applicable to the contractor as well. But when you are pricing that one, okay, when you are pricing that one, we are talking about the cost which is being incurred by the employer. We are not talking about the cost which is being incurred by the contractor. Okay, so this you need to understand when you are moving on to NRM2, right? When you are doing the cost estimating for the pre-tender price, then you are considering into account how you put yourself into his shoes. We call it the devil's advocate scenario. You look from the contractor's eyes. This is how a pre-tender estimate has to be done. How would a contractor thinks, right? This is how. That is why you know that when some lecturers, when they are doing the lectures, he or she goes back and see whether everything is okay, whether the picture that you are seeing is okay, it is visible, or you are asking someone to talk and you are checking whether it is audible or something like that. So it is the best way to do the empathy, practicing the empathy in order to have the correct figure of how would the contractor will think. But in order to arrive into that one, your cost plan is of utmost importance, because based on your cost plan, your cost limit only, you are moving on to the tender price, right? Archaeological remains. Now, these archaeological remains, sometimes when there is a when it is found, the state may take action saying you should stop this site, move away from the site. State has the authority to do that one based on the law of the country, right? They might say that a huge religious uh, 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 element has been found in this particular area, archaeological remain. It is very important for the country's history and all these things. I mean, the country will say, we will pay you some compensation, please move away from the place. So it's a very, very big construction risk. Underground obstructions. Now, you might have seen now there are a lot of sophisticated methods which is being used in the market now. You can, with rather than doing any excavation or something like that, from the top you can check by using sophisticated advanced technological methods in order to find whether there are any underground obstructions, right? Contaminated ground, you know that in UK that the contaminated land is a very, very common thing, right? Contaminated ground is also, if there are any chemicals which is embedded within that one, that needs to be there. Adjacent structures. Now, one of the projects which I'm dealing with now, we have to we have to do something called a dilapidation survey, right? Why do you do a dilapidation survey? Because if this particular construction affects the surrounding buildings, they can sue you, right? They can say that they can ask for compensation. Before suing them, they might ask for compensation, right? They can say that, Mr. Contractor, that when you are doing this particular one, you need to be now employee is also partially responsible for that one, because when you are getting the approval from the authorities, state authorities, they take into account all the considerations, and they might have missed some sensitive area, right? They might have missed something, so that is a risk. Okay, so if an adjacent structure collapses, you may have to pay for that, right? So those things are there. Geotechnical problems, right? Now sometimes you know that there are ambiguities about the subsurface, what are the type of soil and all these things. Then groundwater, right? That is also important, whether dewatering is required. And asbestos and other hazardous materials, that that when I was working in the one of the projects here, that they found, it was a demolition project, they found a little piece of an asbestos. They treated that particular asbestos piece like a bomb, you know right? It was isolated and sent to some other area to get tested, and but I think in Sri Lanka still asbestos is common, right? Some of the countries like Russia and China, they haven't banned asbestos, right? So there are some political reasons as well, which I don't want to discuss. Anyway, so this is how those things are. And then invasive plant growth, right? Tree preservation orders, ecological issues, environmental impact. So all these things are construction risks that the cost planner has to take into account as risks. So it's very difficult, that how we do the pricing. We will discuss about it within the next session as well. So those are the things that come into play. Now I'm moving on to this question which I have asked in the beginning. I'll give you a little bit of a clue, because it will be useful for you for the next session, right? Right. Now, if you go to the risk definition, it says a risk can be defined as an uncertain event or circumstances that, if it occurs, will affect the outcome of a program project. Now, here we are talking about time overrun in a program, cost overrun in a program, and fatality. Okay. Now think what needs to be stopped, what needs to be stopped, or what needs to be eliminated if this is a risk. Okay, I'll give you a little bit of a clue. That is why I just wanted to highlight it to that one. What sort of an action that we would have taken in order to avoid a fatality? Okay, so where are the real risk lies? So think about it, right? And during the next session, I will reveal you the real answer to that one. You still have the time within tonight. You can go through this one and then let me know what are the things that you want to, why you think these items A, E, and H are either real risks or not, right? So we have to think about that as well, right? So today's session is coming into an end, and I will give you a and sort of a bonus half an hour during the last session for Q&A, because the thing is, once you finish all this full of the sessions, you can write, you can note down all your questions. You can be prepared for that one. We can have an interactive session during after the last session, which we are having going to have on 28th of November, right? And in the meantime, let me just explain you what we are going to do within the next day. Those who have attended today and who have not received this what you call first sessions video, please send an email to the Training Hub Asia. If you don't have that contacts, just let me know. I will explain to you how to do that one. So in the third session, what we are going to do is we are going to talk about or more concentration about quantitative risk analysis. Number one is quantitative schedule risk analysis. Number two is quantitative cost risk analysis, right? But we are not going to talk about much about quantitative schedule risk analysis because it is not part of this one. But quantitative cost risk analysis, we are going to have a very in-depth knowledge about that. And the Monte Carlo simulation will be discussed. Then the day three, we are going to discuss about tabulated rules of measurement for risk in elemental cost planning. So that is the third session, which I told that as far as the distribution is concerned, the most risk allowances are included within that one, right? You remember this particular session which I did, right? Sorry about that. 1 minute. See, you can see the word risk allowances appears 447 places, but this out of this one, the word risk is mostly appearing within the elemental cost planning session. Even the risk allowances is appearing mostly in that particular area, right? So that one we are going to discuss in detail, right? And then once again coming back to day three session, which I'm going to discuss, right? Okay, right. Day three, we are going to talk about International Construction Measurement Standards, ICMS. I have already sent it to you. How the risk aspect pertaining to ICMS tallies with NRM1. Okay, that we are going to discuss because ICMS is to have consistency in global cost standards. It is a universal thing, which RICS is also part of it, Royal Institution of Chartered Service. And then this risk approach in ICMS and NRM1 will be profoundly discussed. So this is how we are going to have the third session. I think we are going to close this session today. And thank you very much for listening. After the end of the session, you will be getting this particular what do you call presentation. And as you can see, I don't know whether you can see there is a message which has been sent. You can get more insights about this particular mindful contract administration. There's a YouTube channel which is being run by me. We have already shared that link with you. And then uh, and the other thing is the training hub. The training hub Asia is doing a fantastic job in Sri Lanka, as well as in other countries, the Middle East and India. They are joining hands with them. So go to Training Hub Asia YouTube channel. You will find a lot of important topics to be discussed, and you can subscribe to the both channels, and then you will be getting frequent notifications pertaining to that. So thank you very much for your patience in listening, and wish you good health and happy Diwali to my friends, Hindus and all. And let us meet on 14th, sorry, 21st of November once again. And if you have questions, please write it down and send it to Training Hub Asia, the email ID, and I'll be compiling. I will get advanced information about the questions, and then we will have a very good interactive session, right? Thank you very much, and have a good night. Okay.